Hi, I'm Chris Jussel for the Antiques Roadshow. You never know what you'll see on the Antiques Roadshow. Join us for an hour of discovery as we search the country for America's hidden treasures.
Antiques Roadshow is made possible by the Chubb Group of insurance companies, who, along with 3,000 independent agents and brokers, can insure your world.
And by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
With us today, as always, are specialists from the great auction houses on both coasts. They are joined by some of the country's best independent auctioneers, dealers, and appraisers who have come from near and far to be with us here today. Now, here's our first appraisal.
What type of history or background can you tell me about it?
Well, it's a sword that I found about 22 years ago. My folks had bought a place down in Virginia.
Oh.
And we decided, or my family decided, that we were going to start to rebuild the house. And in the process of doing that, my brothers and I got stuck with helping to tear down the chimney, and that required going up into the attic, starting up there. And I found this thing hanging on a post. And pretty much for me, it became a plaything. And then over the last 10 or 15 years, it's been stored away. I really haven't done much with that, but that's the history that I have with the sword.
Well, Steve, it's quite an interesting sword. This sword was originally made in New Orleans. And if we look on the back side of the blade, right here is the maker's mark. And it says Thomas Griswold, New Orleans. They imported material from England as jewelers, and they also imported arms. During the Civil War, for the Confederate soldiers, they started producing swords and weapons and accoutrements and so forth. This sword is one of about 10 or 12 that I know of. The blade is etched in the middle right here with a CS on both sides for Confederate states. This castle that you see in the guard is actually a fort, and it's Fort Sumter. It was one of the first Confederate victories that there was. The top of the guard here has a distinctive feature to the New Orleans-made swords. The pommel cap is a two-piece construction pommel cap. Griswold's other big feature was a solid brass scabbard. They used this on their cavalry sabers and their artillery sabers. In the field, this was a very flashy sword. It would have been gold-plated all over the hilt and down the scabbard. The blade would have been frosty white etched. This is definitely the highest quality pattern that they produced. Let me give you these white gloves for a moment to take a look at the back side of the blade. It's always a good practice to use the white gloves because your hands have salts in them, and the salts, after you put the sword away to store it, will continue to rust the blade and will create problems with the brass and the leather in the outside. The back side of this blade, you'll also notice, has crossed cannons on the center of the blade. Drums as military motifs. On this side, you've got floral going up and down, very finely etched as any U.S. sword could have been manufactured. Bottom of the guard, right here, you'll notice has gold plated, and that plating would have originally been over the whole sword. Do you have any ideas as to value on this sword?
No, I was going to tag it for a garage sale, as a matter of fact, between $50 and $200.
Well, the tag for your garage sale price probably would have bought you a new garage. This sword's worth about $35,000 on today's market. Most Confederate swords are worth about $2,000 to $10,000. This happens to be one of the great rarities in Confederate swords, is this pattern.
Did you say $35,000?
$35,000.
Wow.
It's a very, very important sword. It really is. You've made a great find here.
Wow. That's amazing. I was gonna get rid of this thing.
Well, you made a smart move. Bring it down for us to take a look at.
Wow. We used this as a kid. I used this to, I cut a watermelon with this thing.
Now, I understand that there's a wonderful history behind this bear. There's a nice little story. Do you want to give us some insight into the history of this bear?
Well, I have an Aunt Mabel that lived in La Jolla, California, and she brought this bear to me about 20 years ago and said, keep it nice, so I did.
Right, yes, you've done a good job with that.
And then I was going to save it for my grandchildren, but I happened to have two the same age. And I didn't know which. I couldn't split them in half, so I've kept it for myself.
So how long did your aunt have this?
Well, she said to me, this is about all I can remember, that she had had it since she was 5.
Right.
And she would be 100 this year, so I think it's like 90, 95
so,
maybe.
Around that. Now, do you know anything about the bears or the bear market or anything about identifying bears?
I know it's a stiff, and I know by the deal in his ear there, that's about all I know about it.
Right. And do you have any idea of what the value of the piece might be?
No, I don't right now.
Okay, good. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the bear, and then we'll tell you what the value would be. This is a great bear, and we'll start here at the top with the ear. And if you can see right up here, there is a button in the ear. And right there, it's a blank button. And you can see that there's no writing on there. So that means that this piece was probably produced in about 1910, 1905, 1910, something like that. The other nice thing is that he has the boot button eyes that are right up here, these black boot button eyes, and also he's got the elongated snout. You see how that is? That's very typical of Stife. He's got the clipped mohair along here. Okay, see that? Now also you see the stitching on the nose. It's the horizontal brown stitching, which means that this was an early bear. This was one of the early ones that Stife produced, correct. Another thing is the limbs themselves are elongated, and you can see that they have pads, the felt pads here. And if you feel on the inside here, there's a little mechanism that would have made a noise. It's inoperable now, but it probably was what's called a squeaker.
Sure.
And that also makes it very desirable. And you kept him out of the sunlight and tucked away?
Mostly wrapped up in tissue paper in a shoebox, I think.
Yeah, that's great. He's got the longer mohair, and because he's a white bear, that also makes him a little more rare and desirable to collectors, because the white bears aren't as common as the brown bears are, the other colors. And what's nice is that you've kept him, whatever you've done, you've kept him in a good environment because he hasn't faded or turned different colors, because sometimes if they're in the sunlight, they turn, different colors. Basically, that's what the bear is, and I would say for an estimation, this bear has the potential of selling close to $6,000.
Really?
Yeah.
You little money maker, you.
When you produced this out of your bag, I got very excited because it's obviously an early American piece of silver. Does it have any family history?
I don't know the full history. I inherited it from my mother-in-law, who inherited it from many generations on her side of the family. Her family's from the Boston area.
Well, the Boston area would explain a lot, because this was made in Boston in the 18th century. It's by a very famous Boston silversmith called Jacob Hurd. There was a whole dynasty of silversmiths of that name in Boston. He was working in the 1740s and 50s. This is actually a typical Boston can. Funnily enough, the Old English word can, C-A-N-N, has continued in usage in America to describe a silver mug like this. Do you have any idea who in your family might have had the initials IB?
I think possibly a Bassett or a Boyce. And it's her family. But we have a genealogy at home, and there were Bassetts and there were Boyces. I don't know if there was anyone named Isaac or what the I stood for. I'm not sure.
It's wonderful to get a piece of colonial American silver like this, which is in basically untouched condition. It's obviously been put away and I don't think seen the light of day for a while.
No, it hasn't. No, it's been in a drawer, in a bag in a drawer.
It's nice in that it hasn't been knocked around, it hasn't been over-polished. I should think underneath this tarnish, there's probably a very nice surface patina. The collectors of American silver love a nice, warm, colored surface patina on silver. It's interesting that on this particular piece, we've got Hurd's Maker's Mark, which typically for a Boston piece of silver is up by the left-hand side of the handle. There was no system of assaying and hallmarking. For the most part, though, they were pretty honest, and most of these colonial pieces are of the right silver standard. It's a marvelous piece of colonial family silver. There's always a premium in American silver of this date for things which come out of a family. For that reason, it's worth more than something that, say, has been up for sale and changed hands many times. Have you ever had any idea what it might be worth?
Not really.
Well, I think one in this state, fresh to the market, I think we could probably expect something in the region of $15,000
Oh my God. Oh my word.
Really? You weren't expecting that, really?
No. I was thinking maybe 2, 3, 15. Oh my gosh. Woo. Wow.
It has all the factors that contribute to a high price. Family history, great condition, and wonderful clear mark, and wonderful family initials on it. It's a marvelous thing. You're very lucky to have it.
So it's a good thing I didn't polish it. Wow.
I understand that this has a great background to it. So why don't you tell me a little bit about some of the things you brought?
Okay, this baseball is a home run hit by George Selkirk in May of 1936. George Selkirk was the right fielder who replaced Babe Ruth after he left the New York Yankees.
Mr. Bachman, can you show us where the ball was hit? Look at this. You can actually tell that it's a game ball because that's where the wood of the bat smashed into it.
Yes, this was hit into the right field grandstand by George Selkirk, and this is the gash in the ball. And I asked George if he would please sign above the gash that's on the ball.
And who else signed on this wonderful ball?
Captain of the New York Yankees, Lou Gehrig. I made sure that I got him right in the center of the ball.
Do you know what they call this in my industry and the collectibles industry? The sweet spot. So the best signature always goes right there in the sweet spot. Look at this ball. It's amazing. You were certainly an industrious kid.
Yes. Joe DiMaggio signed this ball in 1936. He was 19 years old, a young teenager when he first came to the Yankees. The Detroit Tigers were playing the Yankees at the stadium, and I also had Charlie Gehringer sign it. Charlie Gehringer was a Detroit Tigers second baseman, also a Hall of Famer.
Wow, and George Steinbach. Do you have any idea how much value a ball like this would have?
No, I don't have any idea. I assume that after 60 years and the ball is in good condition except after only the gash that's on it, I held on to it because it always reminded me of Lou Gehrig. And Lou Gehrig was #1. He was my idol. He was one of the great men that made baseball and what it is today.
Well, we certainly need more leaders like that today, there's no doubt. But you know, that one gash that you say is an imperfection is actually what adds more value to this ball.
Yes, because what happened was the ball was hit into the right field grandstands, and it hit the steel girder with such force that it bounced over into the bleachers, and my uncle ran up and grabbed it, and he gave it to me, and he told me to get the signatures on it because he knew I was doing that.
Well, it certainly is a lovely piece. You know, just having a Yankee signed ball from 1936 in this wonderful condition, even though it is a little faded, would bring about $6,000 to $8,000. But as I said, you've got this gash in it, which makes it a home run ball for a very specific game. And you know, that can increase the value to something like this to $15,000. Can you believe that?
I'm glad to hear it because I need a new car.
This is a painting that I found at a flea market in Wilmington, Vermont. What caught my attention was that I saw the yellow painting where the light was coming through, and I was very struck by the beauty of the painting.
Right. And so you bought it just because you liked it? Do you have any idea who it might be by or anything?
Well, whenever I was looking at it, I really couldn't tell. There was no distinguishable signature that I really recognized right off. But I was looking through a magazine and something caught my eye, a signature in another painting.
Right.
And I called and I found out who that artist was. Once I found out who the artist was, then I began researching who the painting might be.
And who did you think that artist might be?
Paul Gauguin.
Okay, famous 19th century French painter.
Yes.
Yeah. What did your research tell you?
My research showed me that I had something that was very possible. And that it could very possibly be a piece of his artwork that might have been bought by someone and maybe never exhibited. I knew that it was something that would be a find, but proving it would be one thing.
Right. What sort of clues led you to that?
We got a bunch of books at the library.
Right.
We looked through these books, and then that's where my husband, he saw the signature, and he was able to really decipher it a little bit.
I did the comparisons and found out that the similarities were overwhelming. Then my wife went to the reference of Vincent van Gogh, and because knowing that they were acquaintances, and she found this picture here, and this is of the yellow house that they stayed together for 2 months in Arles, France. It sort of struck me that maybe this is when Paul Gauguin had done some paintings.
Or visited him in Arles.
Gauguin's not the name I would associate with this painting. It doesn't leap to mind first. So if it were to be his, it would be very atypical of his work. He may have been at that point in these Mediterranean houses, but it's not really his subject matter.
Correct.
Talking the signature, that's a little bit of a stretch. First of all, because it starts with a C rather than a P, and you can see that right there. And also, there is a G, which is similar to his work, but the rest of it is not completely convincing that it is by Gauguin. But the most overwhelming piece of evidence is really the materials it's made out of. Gauguin was known to use very rough canvas. It looks almost like burlap. This canvas is actually much newer than he could even paint it on. This was probably manufactured no earlier than maybe 1920. The weave of the canvas is too fine. You can see that down here. And the type of stretchers that it's on are much newer than he could have painted on. He died in 1903. This is in inches. Exactly 9 by 12 inches indicates that it's of English or American origin, which pretty much negates it being French, which would have been a metric measurement. So I think what you have is something done by an Englishman or a French, or an Englishman or an American in the south of France sometime in the early part of the century. There is a similarity in the signature, but I think, unfortunately, it's not a Gauguin.
Well, we know that people, they do copy other people's signatures and that kind of stuff, so we knew that that was a possibility.
Yeah, given the fact that it's an atypical subject matter, the signature is not quite right, and the materials aren't there, I think it doesn't have that much of a chance, unfortunately. I wish it were for you.
Well, at least now we know.
Yeah, actually, something like this probably would be worth maybe $100 to $200.
Tell me something about the helmet that you brought us.
Well, I really don't know much about it. I found it in the attic of the house that I grew up in, cleaning out the attic of some items that belonged to my parents. It was stuck in the rafters.
Do you think the helmet was procured by one of your family or your parents?
I don't really have any idea where it came from. It was wedged in the rafter.
Wedged in the rafter. Interesting. What kind of condition was it in when it was wedged in the rafter? I mean,
it was a little dusty and dirty, so I took some pledge and cleaned it off with a little Windex. And
you used pledge and Windex and cleaned it off.
Probably the wrong thing.
And it came out. So do you have any idea what this object is worth? Do you have any idea what it is?
Well, it looks like a helmet of some kind, but I really don't know. I hope maybe a couple $1,000.
Great. All right, this is a Milanese cabasset helmet from the 16th century. It's a genuine piece. This is forged from a single sheet of steel, which is a fantastic piece of art. If you notice inside, how it's embossed, and that's all hammered from the inside out. These figures are all chased steel from a solid sheet. That's gold embossing, or hammered gold into the steel to create this figure. This is probably a parade helmet, a dress helmet of the period, and it's a very desirable piece of armor. And I would say you have probably a minimum of $250,000 item.
Really? No, really.
Really?
Really?
Really.
Oh my.
Does that come as a surprise?
Yes, even its age is baffling to me.
Mm-hmm. It's a fabulous item. It's a great piece of art.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming to the Antique Roadshow.
This is one of the most famous chairs in America, and it's a fake. During the late 1960s, a Mr. Armand Lamontagne from Scituate, Rhode Island, an amateur cabinet maker, had a museum curator friend who challenged him and said that he bet that he could not make a chair that would fool the experts or fool the museum curators. So Mr. Armand Lamontagne was a little bit upset about this, and he set out to make a 17th century Pilgrim Brewster chair. He actually used a lathe which was slow turning to recreate a 17th century lathe. So you get uneven turning marks on all the spindles. He then assembled the chair and then put this in a chamber behind his house with a log fire underneath and smoked the chair so it would give it a smoky black appearance in all the crevices. Mr. Lamontagne then painted the chair, about 6 coats of paint of red and black, then took off that paint and then smoked it again. And he also used leather and various chisels to induce wear on the arms and spindles of the chair. When this was all done, he actually made one final trip to the ocean off of Rhode Island and tossed this chair into the beach and let it rock against the cliff for a while there, and to even give it more wear. And finally, when it dried out, he actually set the chair in a friend of his antique shop, knowing that it would eventually get noticed. Well, sure enough, it did. It was bought by the president of the Henry Ford Museum, and it was the talk of the entire antiques trade. The chair actually was published on the cover of a catalog which the Henry Ford Museum published on late 17th and early century furniture, and touted as one of the great finds of the century. Well, as the story goes, one day an envelope arrived at the museum, and one of the curators opened the envelope, and inside was a cover story in the Providence Journal from Rhode Island, and the title was, "Dear Henry Ford Museum, you've been had by an expert from Rhode Island." To the credit of the Henry Ford Museum, instead of hiding this chair away from the public, it has been used on exhibition with the story of the hoax as a teaching tool to teach us about fakes and forgeries in American furniture.
Now, let's go back to the floor and see what's turned up.
If it was actually bronze and this size, it would probably be worth about $1,500.
What have you brought us here?
I've got a Revolutionary War discharge signed by George Washington for a man named James Columbus.
You certainly have.
Mm-hmm.
This is a genuine Washington discharge papers with all the old tape work on the back and tears, just as a veteran would have carried it around in his pocket. So many of them are damaged. This one shows damages. Here's Washington's signature, we see.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got June 1783, 1777 through June 1783.
So it's 6 years of service.
How did you come by this?
Actually, my mom, she found it in a black tin box after her aunt died, and she thinks it's been in her family for a long time.
But not a relative, perhaps?
No, not a relative.
Not a relative, yeah. Well, it's these things do appear at sale, and this is a beautiful example. I see you've kept it in a Mylar folder, and I guess you've prepared this catalog entry at the back, which is great. But have you shown it to any friends, or?
Well, yeah, actually, one day about 2 years ago, we took it in for show and tell, And my mom, she really didn't know what it was worth back then, so she took it around and she passed it to all the kids and said, "You're touching something George Washington touched." And here's my mom and the teacher in a big argument at how it's real or not.
This was at your school?
Yeah, the teacher didn't think it was real.
Your teacher didn't believe this was real?
No, she didn't believe it.
Oh, I'm amazed.
She thought it was a fake.
Ah, no, it's as genuine as can be. Do you have any idea what it's worth? I've seen quite a few of them.
Well, someone told my mom it could be worth thousands of dollars, but
Well,
I'm
it
really
is
not
worth
sure.
some thousands of dollars, yes, and they routinely go for between $6,000 and $10,000. The condition factor dictates the demand on the day at an auction, and I'm giving you an auction price now, but it's somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000 on a good day.
That's great.
You're happy with that?
Yeah.
Mary, we're both here today because this is such a wonderful piece of furniture, and we both wanted to be here to talk to you about this fine sewing table. Can you tell us a little bit about how you first came to own this table?
Well, I'm an antiquer from a long time ago, and that was my love, always just scouring the antique shops. When I saw it and I saw the hairy paw feet, I just lit up because I knew I had seen it somewhere in one of the antiques magazines. I can't remember the piece,
sure,
but a piece of furniture with the hairy paw feet.
May I ask, was it something that, did they know what it was? You saw the
It was in their family.
Okay.
It was the stepdaughter's grandmother's. She grew up with it. It used to sit in her living room.
Well, it was actually made by Duncan Fife.
Duncan Fife.
Exactly, in New York, about 1805 or 1810. And it's probably one of his greatest masterpieces. Duncan Fife, as you may know, came from Scotland in the latter part of the 1700s, right about 1798, and had a huge group of wealthy clients who he made furniture for, some of the wealthiest merchants in New York at the time. So this would have been made for somebody
This came from New York. The grandmother and the daughter came.
The family? Yeah,
to Michigan here. I can't remember what year or what, but they did come here from New York.
Do you want to talk about it? Makes perfect sense. I want to agree with Leslie and just say that this is one of the finest pieces of federal furniture that I've ever seen. So you really made my day and Leslie's day by bringing this. This top with canted corners, this rectangular top, opens up and it reveals this wonderful writing area where the writing was done. And this actually pulls up. This has an adjustable board with the original red baize and gold tooled leather. So it's so incredible that survived in this condition with just a few worn spots. You think of that's been there since about 1805 or 1810. It's really incredible. And over on the right side, you have this removable mahogany tray for pens with a pewter-covered inkwell. All the secondary woods here are mahogany. It's incredibly made with these very fine dovetails. It's really amazing craftsmanship. And on the front of the piece, you have a drawer fitted with these Regency-style lion's head brass pulls, probably made in London and imported here into New York.
I didn't know that.
Cabinet makers such as Honoré Lanoyer and Duncan Fife used these brasses from England, pressed brass pulls like this, and they were very fashionable. And this drawer actually, if you pull this out, you can see the wonderful poplar, typical New York wood on the underside, which is very green when it's unoxidized, because the air didn't get in there. It's like a brand new Rolls Royce. The air doesn't get into the doors because the construction's so tight that even though this is from 1805 or 1810, there's no oxidation. It's really quite incredible. And here again, you have mahogany secondary woods on the drawer sides. These flanking legs, with cabriole legs with roundels here, with molding in the front, and these paw feet, these hairy paw feet, and they're raised on their original brass casters, the original little casters. Casters have been around in America since about 1720. And the other thing I absolutely love about it, and Leslie and I both got excited about, is the finish, because the finish on it is so wonderful and untouched. And I'm so glad you never cleaned it.
No.
And
Some
you can
things
see
you know not to.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you realize that what the value of this is?
It's big money.
You think it's certainly in the 5 figures, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well into the
without
5
trouble.
figures, right?
Yeah.
Well, this sewing table is probably worth in the area of around $100,000, and it could bring even higher, in excess of on a good day over 120.
Well, all these wonderful things you said, I felt when I saw it in the antique shop, I knew it was one of these wonderful things.
Right. Mary, I'd like to ask you, you mentioned earlier that antiques have helped change your life and possibly save you from an illness you have. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I had cancer. I had cancer of the cervix 23 years ago. And if I hadn't had the hobby of antiquing, I think I would be gone now. But antiques have kept me. The running and looking for them, the finding them, researching, reading the papers, looking through the magazines, sharing with other people your finds, your treasures.
That's great.
It just carries you all the time. It lifts you. You have no time to get sick or die.
Well, you lifted us, and thanks for bringing this today.
Thank you very much. I knew it would, because I read about you guys in the paper.
Oh boy, okay.
I do.
Thank you, Mary. Very much. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
It's my father's banjo. He used to play in 1930 with a group called the Rhythm Rubies.
Oh, really? The Rhythm Rubies.
The Rhythm Rubies.
This is the name of the band on the case. It's a fantastic name, I think, for a band. Let's see what we've got here. Oh, that's fantastic. I also might point out this case has a compartment here where we took out a little bit earlier these tortoiseshell picks, the wire, which is very, very interesting. What was your father's name?
Nash Sanchez.
Okay.
And he used to play this banjo, and he played a violin.
Okay.
With a small group.
All right.
In 1930.
And how many were in the group?
About four.
About four.
4 gentlemen.
And this is a tenor banjo.
Yes.
And what were the other instruments in the band?
There used to be, I believe, a guitar and I believe a drum set. I'm not sure. And
Right.
he also, like I say, played off.
Now, where do they play in Albuquerque?
On First Street, there was an old dance hall.
Great, great.
And every week they played.
Yeah. Let's see what we've got here. It's really in wonderful condition. If you notice here, there's a name, it says Solo Tone at the top, and this is by Leedy. How long did he play this in the band? How long did the band exist?
I think they were together for about 20 years.
Great. Okay, well, this is all a mother of pearl extraordinary banjo. It's a 4-string banjo. Many of the banjos are 5-string, but this is 4-string with the steel wires. This is probably a catgut on the top of this wire, but it's in great condition. This is all brass. All this is brass here. The inlay is beautiful. It's probably rosewood. There's a lot of rosewood inlay. But the most extraordinary thing about this banjo is the back. It's fully inlaid with mother of pearl. Leedy was an American company, primarily known for percussion and making drums. It is quite collectible, and I think the most important thing is the history with it. And as far as the value of something like, what do you think it's worth? Do you know what it's worth?
It's priceless to me because he died a few months ago, so...
Oh, I'm very sorry. Well, I'm glad you're here, and especially his granddaughter, Heather, is here. We think that in the research that we've done, it's probably worth in the vicinity of up to $12,000. It's an extraordinary piece, and we're so happy you're here.
He would be very happy.
That would be great. I'm sure he would.
I collect African American memorabilia, and I was down in Dallas, and I purchased it from a Mr. Mitchell in Dallas, Texas, and he had purchased it from many years ago from Aunt Sue of Denton, Texas, and it had been in her family since 1878. So I brought it down today because I was interested to find a little provenance on the picture and what you could say about it. It's a Walker painting and a field scene, and
well, it's by William Aiken Walker, who was an artist who worked mainly in the Deep South, painting scenes of rural life. And what makes him interesting is really he was one of the only artists to really be painting this sort of subject. He's generally more interesting from a social point of view than an art historical angle, in that the quality of his painting is sometimes a little bit crude. As a result of that, we're always a little bit concerned with paintings by Walker because there are many copies of his work. And what makes this picture make me think that it is actually an original is, turning to the back, we see, for example, the label here, which is an old Frost & Reed label. Now, Frost & Reed were one of the main suppliers of artist materials in the 19th, and still in this century they've been supplying materials to artists. So that's a good sign. It's obviously quarter of an actual a larger artist board, which he's cut for this use. We have this inscription here, Field and Figures, 9x12, $8. It's by no means still a guarantee, and one would still want to be sure by authenticating the picture with the outside expert who has much more experience. However, I'm pretty convinced that this is an authentic work. It's worth, I would say, well, before I tell you what it's worth, tell me, are you going to tell me what you actually paid for it?
No.
You're not? Okay. So there are 3 figures, which is very unusual. Normally, you usually just see the single figure. We've got this label here, which I'll lean against the picture. It says, this is found on the reverse of the picture. It's not an original label, and in fact, actually, this is just an idea, which says Uncle Moses and his children, Sarah and Thomas, in South Carolina. It's a little bit fanciful to think that this is actually a label that refers to to this scene, as most of the pictures were just scenes that he painted of local life. But I think that this is a very nice example to have the children in the scene as well, and I believe it would be worth between $20,000 and $30,000 at auction.
Fantastic.
Thanks for bringing it in.
That's great. Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Well, this has been in my family for quite a few years, and it was in a family before that we were closely associated with in friendship. And I've taken care of it for 65, 70 years now.
So it actually belonged to your grandfather?
That's right.
And where was he living at the time that you acquired this?
In Kaufman, Texas.
In Kaufman, Texas.
Yeah.
And your feeling was that it was maybe Cherokee from Oklahoma?
Yes, that is correct. It's buffalo hide is one of the main features of it, and the fine quill work that's on it. I've had a Blackfoot Indian check this very carefully, and they said they've never seen a finer quill work than this on this piece here.
Have you used this at all in any way? Have you ever worn it? Or?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
My wife and I have won several prizes. She wears the top, and I wear the bottom, and then I wear a big bonnet with it, see?
That's great. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this. First of all, it's not buffalo hide. It's moose hide.
Moose hide.
It's moose hide.
Oh, all
and
right.
It is not actually Cherokee from Oklahoma. It's actually either Cree or Athabascan from the interior of Canada.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And this particular type of what we call loom quill work is especially fine.
Oh, for goodness.
These panels, which we find starting to be made in the earlier part of the 18th century, that tradition continued all the way up into the 19th century.
Oh, yes.
And as you know, to gather these individual porcupine quills and flatten them between your teeth, and then to get the dyes and dye all the individual porcupine quills was an enormous job.
Oh, I bet.
And so these particular geometric panels here are exquisitely done. As you can notice, the epaulets, these strips on the side of the shirt, are actually somewhat finer than the central panel.
Oh, yes.
So this took many, many hours of work. I judge this to be late 19th century. Have you any idea yourself in terms of value?
No, I haven't. I've never had it appraised before.
Well, this little fancy dress costume you and your wife were sharing, you were wearing a costume that was around $15,000 to $20,000. So is that a surprise?
It certainly is. I'll say it is a surprise. Well, I knew it was valuable, or I wouldn't have packed it around all these years.
That's right.
You're a hardy soul to lug such a big piece.
Oh, sure. I got my workout today doing this.
The biggest piece I've seen yet on the Roadshow. So what can you tell me about your carpet?
Well, I inherited this from my grandmother, actually. As far as I know, she purchased it probably in the 1920s. Had it in the dining room of her house, and she had a companion rug to this in the living room. It was larger, probably about 12 by 15. Then in the 50s, when they put wall-to-wall carpeting in, she moved it upstairs to an upstairs bedroom. And I always absolutely loved this rug. I just thought it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen.
It's quite a nice carpet. And it's also in wonderful condition, which is nice to see in a carpet like this. It was probably new in the 1920s when your grandmother acquired it, because that's where it dates from. It's a carpet from Persia. It's an Iranian carpet from the city of Meshed, which is in eastern Persia. And I want to point out one thing about how you can identify that. Machetes are great. The machete weavers were great in that area. So whenever you see this multicolored finish here on the edge of a carpet, you can be pretty much assured that it's been woven in machete. For the rest of the carpet, the design is picked up. It's really a derivation of a 17th century design that you would see used throughout Persia, primarily in the cities of Isfahan and also around Mashhad and Khorasan. It is just a nice representation of the Persian version of paradise, which is a lush, plentiful garden. Do you use the carpet?
Actually, no, I don't. I don't really have a place to display it properly right now, so it's been rolled up in a spare bedroom in my mother's house.
Oh, okay. Well, should you ever have the opportunity to use it, we usually don't talk about things like this, but I'd like to talk a little bit about how to care for the carpet, so when you do use it, because it's in remarkable condition now, and it would be nice to keep it that way. You should rotate it about once every 6 months or once a year, turn it completely around so it doesn't develop wear patterns. It also, if there's any fading happening from the sun, that'll even out the fading of the sun and keep the carpet in really good shape. The other thing I'd recommend is underneath the carpet is to use a carpet pad. Either a thin piece of rubber if it's going onto a hardwood floor, or what's called in between, which is if it's going down on wall-to-wall carpeting. That helps keep the carpet secure to the floor and stops it from slipping, so it also makes it a bit safer to live with.
Good. Safety first.
Yeah, and the other thing to do is if you start living with it is have it cleaned periodically, not too often, and that cleaning a rug too often will actually hurt the rug. But having too much dirt in the rug will also hurt it because the dirt acts as an abrasive and just wears away at the bottom of the knots. The knots are tied of colored wool yarn on a cotton foundation. So the warp and the weft threads, which are the foundation threads, are made of cotton. Have you ever had it appraised?
Never.
Do you have any sense of its value?
None whatsoever.
Okay, well, I would say because it's a great design with wonderful color and in just immaculate condition, if you were going out to buy this rug today, you'd be looking at a price of around $15,000 to $20,000.
Not bad for a little inherited piece here.
Yeah, well, so it's worthwhile taking care of as well.
All right.
Why don't I give you a hand rolling it up so you can lug it back home?
Thank you.
And you brought this lovely watch to show me.
Yes, I did.
Tell me a few things about it. Tell me how you came by it and what all you know about it.
The story is that Pancho Villa killed a man in Mexico City and took the watch off of him. Then he was raiding up around Columbus, New Mexico around 1910, 12, somewhere before World War I, I think. He ended up in Alpine, Texas, where he traded this watch to Mr. Kasner for a brand new Buick automobile. Mr. Kasner sold it to a Dr. Middlebrook from Del Rio, Texas. And Dr. Middlebrook showed it to my father. My father told the doctor, if you ever want to sell that watch, please give me first chance at it. Dr. Middlebrook died several years later, and his widow called my father, and my father bought the watch. And he never would tell anybody what he paid for it. Now, I cannot prove any of this, and believe me, I've tried.
I understand. Well, let's take a look at the watch and talk a little bit about what could be true about the story. If you examine the watch on the dial, it does have the name of a jewelry store in Mexico City.
La Esmeralda.
It is from the era that it could actually be. The story could be true. The watch is from before the turn of the century.
Right, La Esmeralda's closed up. I had a friend in Mexico City. Check that out.
Initials of the original owner are mounted on the case, which is 18 karat gold in rose diamonds. And then there's a watch fob charm in 18 karat gold that matches, that opens as a locket. There are no pictures left in it, which is too bad.
Pancho Villa probably took them out.
There are diamonds all the way down the chain, which is in 2 colors of gold. The casework is French or Swiss, and the watch movement is a Swiss chronograph, which means it has 4 separate dials on the front. It does moon phase. It counts off the days of the month. It has a stopwatch function that works by pushing this lever here. Then you stop it, then you push it one more time to return it. The lever here is to make it chime, which is sometimes called blind man's function. People who couldn't see could tell the time by pushing this lever and counting the chimes.
Oh, how interesting.
It is a separate little spring that makes it ding. Faintly hear it, but
to hear that.
It's considered a very, very complicated watch because each dial has to have a separate part of the watch movement. It's enhanced by the fact that the materials in it are very, very high quality, and that the chain and fob match the watch and are original to it. Would you have a guess as to how much this watch might be worth in today's market?
That's what I'm doing here.
Somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000.
Would it be worth more if I could prove the story?
Definitely.
That's what I thought. I've tried.
But it is possible from the serial number of the watch to find out for whom it was originally ordered and trace the story back that way.
Well, that'll be a nice job for you, Fred.
It takes some time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming and showing it to us. It's a fabulous watch.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. It was fun.
Well, we know it's signed Tiffany, and my husband found it, and he can tell you that little story. Tell me that story.
Well, I went to the East Coast to see an arts and crafts show, which is a lot of Art Deco stuff. And then I took off and came across the country looking for stuff to buy. And I found this in an antique store in Colorado. And it was just marked green art glass vase. And I was attracted to it, and the price was right, so I bought it.
The lady thought it was ugly.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
She didn't like it.
She didn't like green, I guess.
And how much did you pay for it?
Just under $400.
And what do you think it is?
Well, it's got a signature underneath it that says Tiffany, so I assumed that it was made by Tiffany Studios.
And you've done some research on this?
Yeah, we have an art glass book, and I looked up and found out that he did sign it a number of different ways.
Right.
And Fabrel is the type of glass, and then the dating system has to do with a number and a letter before or after.
Right.
And I dated it, according to that book, 1907.
Great. Well, the first thing one does, or the first thing that I do, is just look at the vase, see what the shape is, the decoration, the color. I never, ever look at a signature, ever. Anyone can add a signature to an object. When I first saw this, my initial reaction was that it is not by Tiffany.
That's fine.
That it is not old, that it was probably made in Italy. What leads me to believe that? The shape is not typical of a Tiffany shape. The glass is too thick. These little tiny flowers here are called millefioris. This is not the way Tiffany would have done it. This green is too green. Again, the glass is too thick. And it does, in fact, have a Tiffany signature on it right here. It says LC Tiffany Favril, which, in my opinion, was added at a much later date. And this was made to deceive. These are made in Italy. We see quite many of them on the market. And I think the antique dealer who sold it as a piece of iridescent art glass was correct. That the signature is not Tiffany, it was added. Another thing that you might want to look at is the iridescence inside. This amber iridescence is not something you would find in exactly that color on a piece of Tiffany. Thank you for coming.
You bet.
Pre-1988, almost every movie poster was sent to movie theaters folded because they traveled with the film from theater to theater in between the film cans, and they would fold them. One of the exceptions to that was a size called 30 by 40. There's 30 by 40 and a bigger one called 40 by 60. These were printed on light cardboard and rolled. They were silk screened. And they were meant to be put on an easel outside the movie theater. I mean, outside in the weather. So very few survived, unless they were never used at all. Where did you find this piece?
At a house sale, just amongst lots of things.
Now, when you framed it, was anything covered up that you remembered?
Maybe a number, like a Roman numeral or something at the bottom.
There would most likely have been a series of numbers down here that's called the National Screen Number.
That's possible.
It would have been the year, which is 1933, and then a slash and 3 numbers. National Screen, which distributed these posters to all the movie theaters in the United States, used to assign a number to every film as it came out during the course of the year. So the first film was 001, and it went up from there. So this is a 30 by 40 silk screen of Duck Soup, original from 1933. How much did you pay for this thing?
Very little.
How much is very little?
Tell you the truth, I really don't remember.
How much did you pay to frame it?
That was pretty expensive.
Yeah?
That was about $350.
$350. This poster in an auction at one of the 4 or 5 major auction houses in New York, LA, or London that auction movie posters would sell conservatively at $15,000.
Okay.
Really glad you brought it in. It's a masterpiece.
Well, we've seen some fascinating things here today. Now let's take a break again, and we'll go to Leila Dunbar, who has a gallery not far from here, and she's going to give us some tips on how one goes about collecting antiques.
So, you want to start collecting? Well, you've come to the right place. Here are just a few examples of the many things that people collect. Chances are, if you were trick-or-treating in the 1920s, you were carrying around one of these jack-o'-lanterns to light your way from home to home. Toys just aren't for kids anymore. They're big business, especially old toys. This is a 1936 arcade cast iron racer, and you don't have to kick the tires to see that it still has a lot of miles left. Cast iron penny banks were produced in the late 1800s to promote thrift among children. After all, you could learn about saving and have a great time doing it too. Here are 3 basic rules to follow if you want to start collecting. First, buy what you like. You're the one who's going to own it. Make sure it's something that you really, really want. Second of all, educate yourself. That means reading, going to antique shows, talking to antique dealers. Don't be afraid to ask us questions. We like to talk about antiques. But remember this always. Don't buy something just because someone tells you it's a good deal. Find out for yourself. The more you know, the better you'll buy. And finally, buy the best condition that you can afford. The biggest mistake beginning collectors make is that they buy pieces in poor condition. They're afraid to buy pieces in better condition. They don't want to spend the extra money. Just the opposite is true. It's the pieces that are in great condition, like these, that are the ones most likely to hold their value or increase in value over time. For example, this is worth about $950 in this condition. In less paint, it could be worth as little as $100. Take away the paint, you take away the price. This cast iron racer can be worth anywhere between $1,000 and $1,500 because of its bright red paint. But if you dug it up, you might as well just throw it away. And finally, this German jack-o'-lantern from the 1920s can be worth up to $500 because it has a red smiley mouth, bright orange, and its original insert. If the insert were torn or missing, maybe not even $100. So remember, spend a few extra dollars, make a little investment, and buy something nice for yourself. After all, aren't you worth it?
Thank you, Leila. We have just a few more tables to visit.
My father bought them for me sometime in the 1950s for my sister and myself, and we played with them for a while, and then, like many toys, they were put in the bag and thrown in the closet.
Museum Extension Project Philadelphia. WPA. Do you know what the WPA means?
Well, Works Project Administration. Right.
Which was a make-work project of Roosevelt's during the early 30s.
Right. Right.
So we're talking about some puppets that date, I guess when your father bought them, they were already, about 25 or 30 years old.
They were fairly old.
If anybody told me I was going to be appraising or looking at some WPA puppets here at the Roadshow, I would have said, no way. Because I tell you, I've seen a lot of WPA puppets over the years, and nothing ever of this quality. As you know, the WPA was a make-work kind of thing. Starving artists and young people out of school who couldn't find a job were hired. They would create these puppets and would go and give shows for children. But as I say, I've never seen the quality, especially when you have these wonderful little the 3 pigs with this incredible wolf puppet. Not only are they hand puppets, but they also are string activated on the back so that their legs actually can work too. I mean, it's just amazing. They're one of a kind. They're paper mache, handmade. It's, in a certain way, it's very, very hard to evaluate something like this.
I can imagine.
If they were made by a famous puppeteer like Boonin or Baird or something like that, we'd have some track record on them. As it stands, you just have to go by their visual appeal, which is just, as I say, totally extraordinary. Well, then I know there's a couple of other puppets that go with the set and a few props, even as I know there's a hod of bricks for the bricklayer
sticks and everything.
Everything you need to put on a regular...
put on a show.
Yes.
Which my sister and I did periodically. Would get the neighbors to come in and be subjected to our amateur puppetry. But,
oh, that's just, it's wonderful.
Fun.
Well, I think the fact that they're so beautiful is fun, but also the fact that it was a government-run project from the 30s during the Depression era, it adds a whole mystique to the, As far as value, if I were having these in an auction, I would expect them to bring in the range of somewhere about $1,800 to $2,500 for the entire set. And I think someone would be very happy to have them for that.
Oh, I think that'd be lovely. And I'm sure my father paid nothing near that. Probably, I don't know what. I'll have to ask him.
Probably $50,
yes,
if lucky.
Maybe, if lucky. Sure.
And at that time, that was a lot of money.
It was.
Some years ago, we were in Philadelphia at the antique art show.
The antique show down there,
the
right?
Antique show. And we spent the whole day, and we didn't find anything. And I felt so relieved. And then the next day, my wife had to go back to pick up a book, and she found these chairs, and we acquired them.
So how many now do you have all together?
We have 4. We didn't see the chairs in the beginning because they were hung on the wall. They weren't set down.
Well, this chair is a wonderful example of a walnut Queen Anne, Pennsylvania, probably Philadelphia chair. It has all these lovely Queen Anne elements, such as this wonderful figured splat with this really vividly figured wood. Do the other splats on the chairs match? Are they similar?
Yes, right.
And this was, in the 18th century, in mid-18th century, this was kind of a way to, this was really the highlight spot for the chair. They had used this wonderfully figured wood. In this case, you have really a Chippendale style crest. So it's, made in the 1750s, but it has this Queen Anne splat with a Chippendale kind of, with this eared crest, and that was very popular by the mid-18th century. The skirt is nicely shaped, so your eye continues on this seam curve down the bracket to this nice narrow ankle with this really full foot. It's very sexy in the leg. I love these curves. They remind you of the curve you see in a beautiful woman's back, don't you think? I mean, a great curve. So that's why I like this chair in particular. If we look inside here, this chair has what probably is the original from the set, yellow pine seat frame. And the glue blocks in here have been replaced, actually. You might have been, that might have been pointed out.
Yes,
they're later, which is fine. That's no problem at all. But one thing that I thought was really interesting is this signature with the stamp, which is on the bottom. And it's actually stamped W. Colliday, and this is actually the owner's brand. And some people get first their mom's name tattooed on their arm. It says mom. They get that crossed out. They say Mary. That gets crossed out. Then it says Beth. This man tattooed really with a branding iron his name in the 18th century, saying these are my chairs. It was some mid-18th century probably owner of these chairs that he just kind of wanted to be immortal. I think have his name there, say these are mine. So it's really nice to see a chair like this. I think it has personality. This is not original. Did you have that put on, or did
no?
That? Yeah.
When we purchased them, that was done.
That was done. Okay. Value-wise, because of just all these have going for them, and to find a set of 4 is really, really great.
Yes.
Would be worth about $40,000 to $45,000 for the set. For the set, with the provenance and all that.
Okay.
Now my question is that more than you
Yes, it is
paid?
more than what I paid for it.
Great.
So we got a good value at the show.
Your wife's going to be happy?
Yes.
When she sees it, she'll probably say, "I told you to buy those." See,
That's right.
Is she going to take credit, or are you going?
No, she'll take all.
She'll take all the credit.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps it up for this edition of Antiques Roadshow. And so, with thanks to our host, I'm Chris Jussel saying so long for all of us on the Antiques Roadshow.
Good night.
Antiques Roadshow is made possible by the Chubb Group of insurance companies, who, along with 3,000 independent agents and brokers, can insure your world.
And by the annual financial support from viewers like you. For videocassette copies of Antiques Roadshow, call 1-800-255-9424. The price is $19.95 plus shipping and handling.
This is PBS.